Hi, Beth. How are you?
Good to be with you, Belinda.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed. We are on the Perfect Child podcast, and I've invited Beth Lambert on. I'm going to start with your bio. Beth Lambert is a former healthcare consultant and teacher. As a consultant, she worked with pharmaceutical, medical device, diagnostic, and other healthcare companies to evaluate industry trends. She is the author of A Compromised Generation: The Epidemic of Chronic Illness in America's Children. She is also a co-author of Documenting Hope's Brain Under Attack, a resource for parents and caregivers with children with PANS, PANDAS, and autoimmune encephalitis. She is a co-author of Reversal of Autism Symptoms Among Dizygotic Twins. Did I pronounce that right?
Got it.
Through a Personalized Lifestyle and Environmental Modification Approach, a case report and review of the literature. Beth founded Documenting Hope and currently serves as executive director. Beth attended Oxford University, graduated from Williams College, holds a master's degree in American Studies from Fairfield University, and an executive education certificate in leadership from Harvard's Kennedy School. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Beth?
I think that about covers it.
It's quite a bit. Um, Tell us what inspired you to create Documenting Hope.
So I got into this work almost 20 years ago, maybe 17, 18 years ago, because I had issues with my children's health. Many people get into this work through their children,
Mhm.
and I had some issues that were like you kind of didn't really have a diagnosis for. It's more like skin issues, gut issues, sensory issues, behavioral issues that got me knocking on a lot of conventional medical doors. In that process, remember I sort of come from that conventional medical world. I'd worked for a lot of the companies that were providing the products and services to people who had health issues. And what I found was that there was no help for my children's symptoms. And I kept asking the question, well, what's causing these symptoms? What's at the root of this? And nobody had an answer for me. They're like, well, we don't really know. It's probably genetic. And here's, pharmaceutical. Here's a cream. That's kind of what you got. That felt
Yeah.
deeply unsatisfactory to me because I didn't have any of these symptoms myself. I always thought I was a healthy person. What's
Yeah.
happening? So then I happened to get in the office of an integrative physician, and then naturopath and some people who are more holistic in their approach. And in very quick order, I had reversed my kids' symptoms just by changing our diet, living in a more kind of ancestral way, eating ancestrally, living our lives in a way that was a little bit more in tune with nature. So, in that process, I was, of course, converted into natural living and natural health because wow, it can reverse my children's symptoms and has a root cause of focus, which is what I was looking for. And then I also at that time happened to meet a lot of other parents who had kids with chronic health conditions. And there were two types of parents I was meeting: parents who had actually fully reversed their kids' conditions, kids who had autism, who had autoimmune diseases, who had life-threatening food allergies, who no longer had those anymore using a sort of natural approach. And then I had met, or was around all those parents and baby play groups and preschools, et cetera, whose kids were just sick. I just felt like everybody's kids had something. Everybody seemed to have some kind of diagnosis.
Yeah.
So that really propelled me on towards both wanting to understand why there were so many sick kids and also bringing forth to those families who had sick kids solutions that they weren't seeing or that they didn't know about. So that was the origin story of Documenting Hope. I wrote a book called The Compromised Generation, which is a cataloging of the many environmental factors that are contributing to our kids' epidemic of chronic illness. But I knew that writing the book wasn't enough. I knew that I needed to do more. So I felt like I needed to create some kind of organization whose purpose was to educate parents about the root causes and also provide the resources for them so that they could find the integrative doctor or they could find the naturopath so that they could learn about the things that they needed to learn to help their children get healthy again.
Yeah, that's really wonderful and so necessary because basically what you're offering is an alternative to the answers that you're not getting when you keep knocking on the conventional doors.
That's right.
And you
Exactly.
have a ton of resources on your website, so many free things that people can read through. Tell me about the flight program.
So we have two arms to our organization. There's our education arm, which is we do interviews with experts. We write tons of articles about, all sorts of topics. We have health coach training. We have a private membership community for families that teaches them how to do this work. So that's all on the education side. Then we also have a whole research arm. And our research arm was started because we kept hearing from parents who wanted to pursue this lifestyle, that wanted to pursue alternative kinds of approaches to their children's health and healing, that their doctors were saying there's no evidence. There's no evidence that a gluten-free, casein-free diet, there's no evidence that it works. There's no evidence that autism is reversible. There's no evidence that you can stop a life-threatening food allergy. Like they kept saying there was no evidence. And I knew that wasn't true. It's just that the evidence hadn't been published in peer-reviewed literature yet, or that they hadn't learned about it in medical school. So we started a couple of research studies to begin to build the body of evidence. So we have one research study that collects data on how children are living in the modern world and on how those factors that they're exposed to correlate with health outcomes. And then we have another study called the FLIGHT study, and that stands for Facilitated Longitudinal Investigation of Genuine Health Transformation. It's kind of a mouthful. I like all these scientific studies like to create these acronyms, right? Well, this one is essentially testing a model of what we've seen to work in real life, which is when a parent learns the things that are disrupting their child's health, and they learn how to support their child's health in a bioindividual way, that's when you see these recoveries happen. That's when you see the disease reversal happen. So we created a study design where we have designed an education program and a coaching program, and it's 12 months long. And it basically creates group coaching cohorts where we are bringing together a group of parents. And in this case, these are parents of children with autism, although this is broadly applicable because whether your child has autism or whether they have eczema, really the same things are important and apply. So in this flight study, we are taking cohorts of families who have children with autism, bringing them through a 12-month education and coaching program, and tracking any changes that happen to the child in terms of symptoms, behaviors, and all the other things that you would measure for a child in autism to see what happens, what changes. Again, because this is what we know happens in real life when we see these recoveries. So we want to do this in a documented scientific way so that we can take this evidence and go back out into the world and say, listen, when you change your mind about what causes health or what contributes to health, when you change your mind about what you're eating and how you're living, it makes an actual impact on reducing symptoms for children with autism. But truly, we could replicate this in any disease area, any condition area. And we plan to in the future do different iterations of this as we fund different cohorts for this study design.
Yeah, that's interesting because I guess because you've been studying this for so long, you must see that there probably is some commonalities in what best serves health
Oh, for
and
sure.
wellness.
No doubt. I mean, I've been studying and documenting stories of children and adults who have fully reversed their chronic health conditions and
Mhm.
neurobehavioral and developmental conditions. I've been doing that for almost 20 years. So you, of
Mhm.
course, you see patterns in what happens. And, there's things that I can say with certainty after watching all these probably hundreds of cases that I've either documented on, in a written way or through video stories that are told, or just the people that I meet and I, sort of register their story in my mind. There's patterns you recognize like none of these stories happen without diet changes. Nutrition is central to and a piece of every single person's story. That's like I can say that very confidently. Another one would be detoxifying the environment, meaning trying to get as many toxic exposures out of that child's life. That is across all of these stories.
Hmm. Can you name a couple of toxic exposures?
Absolutely. So anything in that's in and around our homes that we use for cleaning, personal care products,
Mhm.
cosmetics, anything that is, coming from a factory, you have to check to see whether it has toxicants in it. So toxicants could be, the fragrances that are in our laundry detergents or the fragrances that are in our shampoos. It could be the preservatives that are put into our toothpaste. It could be, any number of things that are put into our food. So, for instance, you have preservatives that are put on in our foods for shelf stability,
Mhm.
right? So you can pretty much like walk around anyone's house. pick up products that are manufactured in a factory, look on the back and look at the label. And if you recognize what's on that label, so if it's like shea butter or coconut oil, you're good. Why? Because you can eat that stuff. Like if you can eat it and it comes from nature, you're probably good. But that's not what we see in most modern American homes is you look on the back of any product and there's dozens and dozens and dozens of chemicals that most people don't know what they are. And
Oh, of course not.
they're synthetic toxicants, they're
Mhm.
colorings, they're preservatives, they're things that can cause cancer. There's things that are endocrine disrupting. I mean, just thousands and thousands of chemicals that we're exposed to every day, just living the standard American, modern American life. So when these families have gotten better, they have chosen natural products instead of these conventional synthetic products. And that sounds like such a little thing, right? Like how could swapping out your shampoo or your toothpaste really matter? And it's not about the individual exposure. It isn't just the fragrance in that shampoo. It's not like, because that would sound ridiculous, right? Like how does
Right.
fragrance in shampoo cause asthma or how does fragrance in shampoo cause ADHD? It's not the individual chemical, it's the cumulative and compounding effect of thousands of chemicals that we're exposed to every single day in our homes. And if you think about it, we live so differently today than our ancestors did, even just 150 years ago, right?
Absolutely. So much farther away from the earth.
That's right. Exactly. And not only is it the products, it's the rhythms of our life. So before
Yes.
electricity, think about that. We would
Mhm.
operate within sunlight and daylight, and we would get
Mhm.
with the sun and we would sort of wind down as the sun went down, right? And you would
Mhm.
operate by candlelight or by firelight. And now we are just on 24/7 because we can
Yes.
be, right? Like we
Yeah.
stay up till 3 in the morning watching Netflix or what have you, because we can do that. Of
Mhm.
course, that affects our physiology and our biology. It's just that we haven't caught up to that yet in terms of understanding that, living out of sync with nature actually has a meaningful negative effect on our health.
And that's interesting that you would say we haven't caught up to that yet, the ill effects, which we know it's not rocket science to know
Mm-mm.
that. And for a medical professional not to ever mention any of that, that is unconscionable.
Yeah, but it wasn't part of their training. I mean, that's the way I look at most conventionally trained physicians. They usually go into medicine because they want to help people.
Yeah.
And when they get into medicine, they have a very deep expertise that they develop, but it's very mechanistic, it's very reductionist. It's very much about biochemistry and how do the different molecules work together, and their education is good. And it, like if you think about emergency medicine, thank
Yes.
God we have these doctors who know how to put people back together after accidents. And there's many wonderful things about modern medicine, but they don't teach you, they didn't teach you, and it's changing a little bit now, but in most medical schools, you don't learn nutrition. You don't learn about circadian biology. You don't learn about toxins in the environment and how to detoxify. Like all these things that are vital to health are not taught in medical school. So we have this entire legion of physicians out there who are responsible for people's health.
Yeah.
They're not really teaching or understanding the foundations of health. So it's like we skipped over the foundations part and got to really, complex pharmaceuticals to try and treat the symptoms. When what
Right.
we really need to do is go back to the foundations and the basics.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a little bit of what you're talking about earlier that touched upon total load theory. So do you want to go a little bit deeper into the total load theory?
Yeah, so the total load theory is this way of understanding how it is that modern living can make us so sick. Because, once you get into thinking about modern living and how it impacts health, it gets really complex quickly because, it's overwhelming. Because again,
Mm.
there's thousands of different exposures and thousands of things that we do differently from our ancestors. The total load theory is a way of sort of synthesizing all of that and explaining how our physical bodies only have so much capacity to tolerate all of these stressors in the modern world, and that at some point we just can't handle anymore, and that's when you get symptoms. So it's kind of like this idea of a barrel. Like our bodies are what would be a barrel of water, and each stressor, whether it's a toxic chemical, a preservative in the food, or a medication, or whatever it is, that's a stressor on the body. That's like a drop of water going into that barrel, and at some point that barrel fills up and overflows. And when that happens, that's when you get our symptoms. So it's a very kind of simple concept to basically just explain how, human bodies are amazingly resilient and adaptable, but only to a certain point. right? And what happens with our kids in particular is their barrels get filled up when they're going through critical developmental times. So their
Yes.
vision is developing, their hearing is
Mhm.
developing, their social interaction and understanding how to make sense of social cues that are extremely complex. This is all going on in their bodies and their brains, from in utero on. And so the first 3 years of life, if their body is still dealing with chemicals from the shampoos and chemicals from the formula, heavy metals from the air and water and soil, like things that their bodies have to deal with, they're in survival mode because the body will always prioritize survival over development. So sometimes when a child's barrel is too full with too many stressors, they're stuck in this sort of sympathetic nervous system state where they're in a state of survival. So they're just trying to survive. They don't have enough energy or capacity to develop vision, to develop hearing, to develop language, to develop motor function. So there are deficits that our children have when their total load is too great, when they're going through that critical developmental time. So that's why we see so many kids with learning disabilities and with who need vision assistance, who have glasses or who have auditory processing or sensory processing. This is why we have so many kids with autism and ADHD because there is a developmental interruption. They weren't able to develop along a typical trajectory because their body was so busy surviving.
Well, that is very interesting that you're talking about that because a lot of the overload that hinders the natural developmental capacities of children is when we inject them with
Hmm.
toxins very early on. Their bodies are still developing. And I did a lot of studying of Rudolf Steiner's philosophy, and he's the one that, started Waldorf schools. And a lot of what he talks about is the child's body is still developing, and the critical developmental time is birth to at least age 7. And during that time, you don't want to introduce any academics, any reading or math or any of that stuff because the body is still developing. And so the body needs all of its capacities, all the energy to go towards developing the organs. We don't want to overfill the brain. And so
Hmm.
this is exactly what's going on because on top of stressing your child out early on with the toxins, the injections, right? And then you start filling their brains because everybody wants their kids to be reading by 4, right? And then they're not only are they not able to continue developing, but you're adding on to the stress of school. And
Hmm.
then you're continuing those injections, and then you're continuing the stress of school, and you're continuing all of the environmental factors and the food factors. So it's no wonder why so many people are experiencing chronic illness.
That's right. I mean, I'm such a fan of Steiner because at the core, he's really like, let's go back to nature, right? Let's just live as in sync with nature as possible. And I feel like we don't even know what we don't know because this is really a cultural problem. We all live in modern Western culture, and in that culture, there's norms. So, there's certain foods that people eat that are normal. There are certain activities that people do that are normal. So once you become a parent and you
Normalized.
normalize, thank you, normalized. You think that these things are what you're supposed to be doing. This is what you're supposed to do with your baby. You're supposed to put them in, a bouncy chair and let them sit all day and play with toys. You're supposed to feed them, rice in their formula at 2 months old. Like there's all these things that become established as this is what you do because this is what culture says so. But that culture is kind of an emergent phenomenon that's ever changing in the United States. Our culture shifted drastically post World War II. Like we became
Mhm.
this industrial, synthetic, chemicals just burst onto the scenes. And like everything we started doing from how we live to the products we use and how we eat, everything became synthetic,
Mhm.
including like how we like the babies don't even move naturally. That became synthetic. We put them in apparatuses and like machines and put them in unnatural kind of movement environments. So this is the moment we're in. This is the cultural moment we're in. So it feels normal to the parents to do the things that are actually very destructive to our children's health, but we don't know that because we don't have anything else to compare it to.
Right. And this is why Perfect Child exists, is because I want to tell the stories, right? Because I think we're at this point right now. Thank you for doing the science and trying to create the studies so that people believe it. But let's talk about, we're at a time right now where we need to lean into actual stories of
Mhm.
actual humans that have discovered and lived a recovery
Mhm.
and not look for the science and not wait for the science. Because remember, in the 80s, science told us that eggs were bad for us, that
Mhm.
fat was bad for us, that we should be loading up on margarine.
Mhm.
So, you know what? Come on, guys. And now we know. So the more that we know, the better we can do, right? And I feel like people could potentially be listening to this and feeling bad about, oh yeah, like I did feed my child rice and I did feed my child formula and all of this stuff. I did. I
Mhm.
was that person. And this is why I've created this platform because oh my gosh, I could have done I could have done a whole better job. But
Mhm.
I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I don't want anybody else to beat themselves over it. These are the things. This is what was handed to us. They gave my daughter Similac. They
Mhm.
sent us home with that. And when you talk about labels and chemicals, I don't even want to look at what's in there. I know that there's at least 20 chemicals in there that have nothing to do. And a lot of it is sugar. And sugar is terrible for the baby's development. So it's like when we know these things, let's say no. Let's just say no.
It's know better, do better, right? Because
Right.
again, I think there's some intergenerational knowledge that we've kind of rejected. Like I think about the grandmothers and the great grandmothers who might be looking down at the younger parents and being like, we didn't do it that way when you guys were growing up and you turned out okay. So I do think we should listen to the grandmothers and the great grandmothers or grandfathers and embrace some of that intergenerational knowledge. But also to your point is a very good point. We have to not get caught in the guilt of what we have done or if we didn't know we didn't know, like there's nothing you can do,
Yeah.
but you can know better and you can do better going forward.
Yeah. Like everything that I tell my friends now who are having kids or have kids, everything that I'm telling them has nothing to do with what I did with my kid.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
don't do what I did. Don't look at the replay of my life being a parent. Don't do that. Now that
No.
we know better, let me just tell you what I think is better. And you can make your own choices.
There's lessons to be learned, right? And I actually think there is an entire huge community of parents who are reflecting back on that now, being like, I didn't know, but now I do. So I'm doing things differently now. And we're kind of out there trying, just like you, trying to talk to parents who are, or may parents to be, especially
Mhm.
those who haven't gone down that path yet, and let them know there's a different way to do this.
Yeah, there really is.
Mhm.
And so going back to all of the studies that you've done, you told us a little bit about the environmental factors. Do you see patterns in the food and inflammation? What do you see with that?
Yeah, I mean, food is complicated because food is supposed to be nourishing, and we really shouldn't have to think too hard about it. Again, this should be a cultural thing that was passed down generation from generation, and there's wisdom in food culture, and things were prepared a certain way for a reason, because for thousands of years, humans figured out how to prepare foods, how to soak them, how to sprout them, whatever it is that would make the foods most nourishing to us. We got all cocky in this sort of modern world, and we're like, you know what? That's the way people used to do it. We're going to process it and package it and put it on the shelf, and then it'll sit there forever and it'll be great. That hubris has really created a major problem for us because we are overfed and undernourished. And what does that mean? That means that the foods that we're eating most frequently on a daily basis have been highly refined. All the nutrients have been stripped out of them. They're refined, like they're carbohydrates that are refined that are disrupting our gut bacteria and really setting us up for allergies and inflammation. And there's all the additives I was mentioning before, the preservatives, the colorings, et cetera. I think the biggest thing about our, the way out of the food issue is to stop eating so much processed foods, to stop eating things that come from a factory and just go back to whatever roots we can find. If you have cultural roots that, made food a certain way, see if you can reach back to grandma's recipe or great grandma's recipe. See if you can go back sort of before the modern industrial food revolution, which really took off after World War II. I mean, it started earlier than that, but that's when we really started embracing industrial food. So
Mhm.
local foods that are organic, that are minimally processed, if at all, that's where we're going to find the path forward. And I think oftentimes about the the victory garden that they used to talk about
Yes.
during the wartime,
Yes.
when
Yes.
gardens were a necessity because there were food shortages. Well, we don't need to be operating out of scarcity, that there's no food shortages, but we do need to be thinking about creating the most vital food that we can that's close to home. And not everybody has access to a garden or even a space to garden. Lots of people who live in urban spaces don't have that. Some do because there are some community gardens that are in urban spaces, but that's one of the most powerful things we can do is to grow or raise your own food, and have it as close to nature again as possible without pesticides, without herbicides, without any kinds of adulteration, and
Yeah.
and just go back to again nature and get as close to nature in our food as possible.
Yeah. And actually, along those same lines, I just interviewed this organization called Growing Gardens here in Portland, Oregon. And they sort of do that sort of thing where they encourage people to grow gardens, right,
Mm,
in their homes. And if they're not familiar with it, they have people that will come and plant your garden for you. And if you need them to manage it, they will do that too. And I know that there was a friend of mine that was trying to do that. He was trying to bring victory gardens back to the people because, like you say, it's the most powerful. And instead of having this plot of green grass that you're watering constantly that doesn't belong in California,
mhm,
for instance, if you
mhm,
made that into a productive garden and
mhm,
everybody had a productive garden, oh, it'd be amazing. My husband met a man who I think lived in like Eastern Oregon, where he was like, oh, yeah, we all grow different vegetables, and then we would come together and we just barter. I
mhm,
have zucchini, you have goat cheese, like let's just trade. And this is how we thrive.
mhm,
Like get to know your local farmers. And even when you say like people in urban areas or even apartments, you can still grow something.
mhm,
And
mhm.
have you ever read the books, the Anastasia series?
No.
Okay, so I forget the actual name of it, but it's about Anastasia, and she's just this woman who's old world, and this man discovers her, and they talk about how when you grow a garden, like, oh, in the light of the moon, take a shower in your garden because all the cells that come off of your body into the garden, the foods that grow will be specifically for you.
Mm-hmm.
And they also say that in a place where you live, if you have weeds growing in your garden, those are the medicinals that your body needs.
I've actually lived that personally because
Yeah.
I had this obsession with lemon balm that came from lemon balm is, a medicinal plant that grows like a weed and it grows everywhere.
Mhm.
You have a little bit and all of a sudden it's like a mint plant and it just takes off and goes everywhere. And I remember just being like in this battle with a lemon balm and like I couldn't get it out of my herb garden and it kept growing. And then I realized this was in a period of time when I was really understanding my own nervous system and how to regulate my own nervous system. And I learned my nervous system was very dysregulated. And I was really kind of like in this stressed fight or flight kind of mode. As in, I'm stressed pulling the lemon balm out of my garden. I was like, what is this lemon balm for? Like, what's it for? And you look it up and it's a nervous system tonic. It is for helping you to regulate the nervous system. That was a gift that was being delivered to me that I didn't even
Yes.
know. Now I take it every day. It's like one of my
Right.
my main staples. And I'm like so grateful that it's growing like a weed in my herb garden.
Right.
It's really amazing how things like that happen for us.
Right. Right. And here we are like trying to pull these out, and they're literally just gifts from Mother Nature.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had that same experience with purslane. Purslane is another one that
Yes.
grows kind of wild and can be overrun a garden. And that's very high in omega-3s and,
Yeah.
another nutritional gift.
Right. Right. And that's why everyone should be looking at if you have a garden, look at the weeds that you're pulling. Maybe
hmm
you need to eat them.
hmm
Yeah,
hmm
I had an herbalist friend that was walking on my land and was like, you should be pulling these weeds every morning and putting them in a tea.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just totally makes sense,
hmm I know
right?
what an amazing gift from nature. It's just really incredible.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so tell us about your book, Brain Under Attack.
So that was a book that we wrote that with it was a group of us at Documenting Hope, some colleagues who got together, really seeing that there was a tremendous unmet need for parents who had children with PANS and PANDAS or autoimmune encephalitis. So what that is those are the words given to a condition where children develop autoimmunity to brain tissue, and it can vary sort of what type of autoimmunity. And the names are associated with the type of autoimmunity, but also the type of infection that can get into the brain. So essentially, what happens is children are exposed to some kind of infectious agent. It could be mold, it could be mycoplasma, it could be strep, it could be any number of viruses, bacteria, fungi. Blood-brain barrier gets breached, and the immune system and these infections get into the brain, and the immune system goes in there to try and clear it out. And what it ends up looking like is autoimmunity. I think we have a very big misunderstanding about what autoimmunity is in conventional medicine. People talk about it like, oh, your immune system gets confused and it's attacking your own tissues. I don't see that as what's happening. I see it as your immune system's doing exactly what it was designed to do, is trying to go in and get something out, whether it's toxins or infections
Yes.
or what have you. So these conditions, PANS, PANDAS, and autoimmune encephalitis are just names that we give to this scenario.
Mhm.
And what happens is it's usually sudden onset, not always, but usually sudden onset. Child is typically developing, so they don't have any like autism or any kind of neurobehavioral conditions. And then all of a sudden, bam, at like 9, 10, 11 years old, could be 14 years old, older, they all of a sudden develop acute symptoms, and they're very concerning for parents. So they could be OCD, anxiety, tics, emotional or developmental regression. So they might do baby talk. They might wet their bed when they hadn't done that for 10 years. I mean, there's all these kinds of things, these mysterious symptoms that emerge, which seem psychiatric. In many parents, when this happens to their child, they might describe it as my child going suddenly crazy. And that was actually the first title we had for the book before we titled it Brain Under Attack. It was suddenly crazy because that was
Mhm.
actually how parents had described it. And then many of these kids end up in psychiatric units in hospitals, and they medicate them, and they don't understand how to treat this. But what was really happening is the kids just their immune system is out of balance. They got overloaded. Blood-brain barrier was breached, toxins got in, immune system's doing its job, but the immune system can't quite kick it out. The body's not strong enough to kick it out.
Mhm.
So that becomes this condition. So we wrote this book to be a resource guide for parents who have children with this condition. Because this was in 2018 when we wrote this book. There was hardly anything in terms of a resource for these parents. They really, again, we're ending up in these psychiatric wards. So the good news and what's in this book, but also what we document and profile on our website and our YouTube channel is this is absolutely reversible. When Pans and Pandas started, first came out and the doctors were coming up with a name for it, a diagnosis for it, they were telling parents this would probably be lifelong. You'll always have to have them on chronic antibiotics and all this like doom and gloom. Meanwhile, there's all these parents who figured it out on their own, sometimes working with naturopaths or other holistic type of practitioners who have
Yeah.
fully reversed this condition. So we've documented tons of cases of kids who have fully reversed their PANS and PANDAS. So that's why we wrote that book, Brain Under Attack, because we felt like we needed to give parents the tools and the resources to help their children heal from this, and also give them the assurance that lots of other people have already healed from this. I mean, that's probably the one diagnosis that I have the most recovery stories from, which is very, very encouraging.
Brain under attack.
Mhm.
And also, do we think that the vaccines also cross the blood-brain barrier and inflame the brain? And this could very well be that, just too much toxins.
Yeah, so vaccines are documented to cause a blood-brain barrier breach. Some of the ingredients in them, like polysorbate 80, are known to cause blood-brain barrier breach. And then they have, at some of them, have adjuvants like aluminum, which again can
Mhm.
also do that. And then if the aluminum gets in through the blood-brain barrier, it lodges itself in the brain tissue. Of course, the immune system's going to try and go in there and get it out. It's going to stimulate inflammation and a neuroimmune process from there on out. So, vaccines are often part of the story of a child who develops PANS or PANDAS. Like, for instance, that child might have had been, let's say, very common is they're on antibiotics for strep throat, or they're on antibiotics for some kind of infection. And then a couple weeks later, they get a vaccine. If they're on antibiotics, their immune system is wiped out because your microbiome is in your gastrointestinal tract. That's the seat of your health. That's where the functions of your immune system are headquartered. And so when you take antibiotics, you weaken that. And then if you get a vaccine a couple weeks later, you're already in a vulnerable state. And then that vaccine can cause a blood-brain barrier breach, but so can, believe it or not, EMF exposure. That's a very common factor is excessive exposure to Wi-Fi, electrical fields that can cause a blood-brain barrier breach as well. So this is really a combo. It's not like it's caused by vaccines or caused by
Mhm.
antibiotics or caused by Wi-Fi. It's really kind of all of them. And you'll have some kids who have PANS and PANDAS and they've never had a vaccine. You have some kids who, don't have Wi-Fi in their surroundings, but they got antibiotics. Like it's a combination of things. A very, very common feature of PANS and PANDAS is mold exposure. That is something in the home environment, like if there's moisture in the home and you have mold growing in the walls or, behind a cabinet or something like that. If the child is already vulnerable in terms of their immune system, let's say they had a couple rounds of antibiotics for ear infections or what have you, and they're in a moldy home, that does create a situation where they're more susceptible to developing something like PANS or PANDAS.
And that's so hard because that's the one thing that's so hard to determine if you have mold.
Right. I mean, there are ways I will say now, as opposed to even just a few years ago, there are so many more resources for mold and to help people determine whether they have mold in their home. The very easiest thing you can do is go on Amazon or go to your hardware store and get a moisture meter. They're like $30 and you can walk around with this thing and put it into any places you might suspect, like put it by the walls near your bed, put it in your bathroom and find out where there might be moisture that is, more than typical, more than just like, the bathroom after a shower or something like that. If you have the moisture meter and you find that there's areas that it's registering high for moisture, you probably have mold. So that's a
Mm.
very simple way to do it. But there's a dust test. There's a company called the dust test where you can actually test the dust in your home to see if there's any spores from the
Mhm.
mold. There's a company called the Mold Co. where you can test your urine, test your blood, and find out whether you have mycotoxins. That's the toxins produced by the mold.
Mhm.
And mold is, an environmental hazard in the home, but it's also in our food. And this is another piece, another chapter of the whole industrial food system. We were talking about eating locally before and how that's important. What we do with a lot of our grains and nuts in particular is we, grow them and we store them. And they sit in these
Mhm.
big silos. Coffee beans are another one. We store these things for a long period of time, so much so that they grow molds. And then when we process them, the molds and the mycotoxins are in the processed foods and in our coffee. And then we consume it and our body reacts negatively to it because it's not so much, it's the mycotoxins, it's what the mold puts out that our body sees as a toxin and it creates inflammation, it creates an immune response. So that's a very common feature of living in the modern world is we have processed foods that have mycotoxins on them.
Right, right. Yeah, convenience is pretty much killing humanity.
Kind of is. I mean, it's kind
The
of awesome.
pursuit of
We love it.
convenience.
I know we love the things being convenient, but there's a cost.
There's a cost. There's totally a cost. Now, do you think that when people come to you and they have chronic illness or they have the PANS and the PANDAS, is the first recommendation to check for mold?
Not always. I mean, I feel
Okay.
like mold is, there are sort of syndromes that people
Mhm.
describe where you suspect mold. Anytime I hear somebody who has tics or OCD, chronic cough, like there's certain things that you would look for. And, I'm not a doctor, but I've been like sort of taking these notes as I've been listening to people's stories. There's certain like red flags for mold. So anybody
Mhm.
who has PANS and PANDAS, that is one of the first questions I would ask. Autism also, because autism, at least two-thirds of kids with autism have what would be clinically diagnosed PANS or PANDAS. Autism is
Mhm.
also brain inflammation. It is also
Mhm.
autoimmunity in the brain. It just manifests differently than PANS or PANDAS. And these kids didn't have the difference is the kids who have PANS and PANDAS already went through their developmental milestones
Mhm.
relatively undisturbed, whereas the kids with autism didn't have that opportunity. Their development was interrupted or impacted. But I would say if you have a child with autism or PANS and PANDAS, it is a very good idea to look for mold because that could
Mhm.
be the thing. Like, let's say you're eating a nutritious diet, you have no toxins in your home, and your child isn't making any progress on the healing journey. That might be another time I might look for mold because it's like the mold keeps your immune system busy. So it's like always
Okay.
in survival because it's constantly fighting the mycotoxins. It's constantly
Right.
dealing with it and processing it. And your liver and your kidneys have to deal with that every single day. So I feel like
Mhm.
if you have a child whose family is doing all the right things, trying to help support their body, but they're not making any progress, there might be something in the environment that's holding them down.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. There's so many different levels and factors to this health and healing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you ever find that people are resistant to cleaning up their environment or their diets?
Of course. I think all of us naturally resist change. And that's what cleaning up your diets or changing your habits, like change is hard. It's really, humans are just, I always think of humans as like these little ants, like doing the thing on the ant hill. I mean, we go like carry the thing into the ant hill and then we come back from the ant hill. You know, I mean, they're the very like
Yeah.
systematic creatures, ants, right? And humans are too. And we like our
Mhm.
patterns and we like our rhythms. And so when you have to change the food you eat, that your comfort food, like let's say you have oatmeal for breakfast every morning and you've always had oatmeal for breakfast any morning, and it's how you start your day and you love your oatmeal. That's very hard to give up. It's like emotional. Food is very emotional to us. Like maybe your mom fed you oatmeal every day. Maybe your grandma did and you have an emotional connection to it. So that's an example of how it's hard to change. We develop these patterns over time and they create comfort and safety for us. So when you have to change away from that, you're moving out of comfort and safety. You're going into the unknown, and that can be very scary for people. So I think the best antidote to that is to do it with other people. You know, if you're somebody who's like, "Ah, I know I got to change the family's diet. I know I got to do this, detox in my home." Find a group that's doing it or find people that are doing it. Maybe a family member wants to do it with you. Like use that. Let's do a 30-day challenge. You know, people did that whole 30 because they loved
Yeah.
the challenge of it. And I think that's kind of how we need to think about that change. Like, let's challenge ourselves, but let's do it in community. It's a lot easier if you're doing it with other people.
Yeah, definitely. Now, does Documenting Hope offer that community?
Sure do. We have a community. It's called Healing Together, and which I love that name because that's exactly what's happening. And I love this community so much. I can't even tell you. It's like we started this in 2023 as a place for us to more regularly meet with people who were in our broader community, but that we didn't have the opportunity. Like once a year, maybe we would see them at a conference or that kind of thing. We wanted to see people all the time. And we wanted to be able to provide more step-by-step healing knowledge to the families who wanted to learn how to do this work. So it's an online community, and we meet twice a month via Zoom with our community members. One of those calls is hosted by integrative physicians. So we have two integrative physicians who are there to answer your questions. Let's say you want to do lab tests, or you had a question about supplements or something like that. They're available to answer questions. The other call we have during the month is with health coaches. And they're
Okay.
not just health coaches, they're like massive resources. They understand developmental needs and like different kinds of sensory therapies and all those kinds of things for kids who have more complex issues. And then we have an online forum and we have ebooks and guides and we have this whole lovely little we call it our healing trail map, and it's like a schema of a mountain with different stops on your journey. We like to think of this whole thing as a journey, right? It's an
Yeah.
adventure, it's a journey. You're climbing a mountain. Climbing mountains, that's not easy. It might take a little work, but when you get to the top, man, is that reward good? So that's what
Wow.
we use as our guiding principle is like join us on the journey. And so we provide that kind of conceptual model for people when they come into our community. And it's been the most rewarding thing, I'll tell you, because we've had this for a couple of years. And now the healing stories are coming forth. So people who joined us in the very beginning are
Yeah.
coming back to us and telling us that their child lost their diagnosis and they're starting to share their
That's
story.
only 3 years.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It's like the most gratifying thing ever because this is the whole point. This is the whole point of the work that I have done and my colleagues have been committed to is to get the kids and the families to that place of health and healing and resiliency. And that is just, it's so gratifying.
That's amazing. And the mountain is sort of like a visual, a visual of your progress.
That's right. And there's not one path to go up the mountain, right? There's
Right.
lots of ways to climb the mountain. You can take any number of paths to it. And that's such an important thing that we teach is that this is so bio-individual. You see a lot on
Yes.
the internet, like TikTok videos or Instagram, like people are trying to sell protocols for various things, or they're selling
Mhm.
products like this product for eczema or this product for psoriasis or whatever. And there's no one path to healing. Every
Mm-mm.
person needs to be treated as an individual. And that's why I feel like there is no better person to guide the healing journey than a parent because a parent
Absolutely.
knows their child better than anyone else. There could like better than any specialist doctor out there, better than any health coach who's super knowledgeable. The parent has the most insight into what their child needs.
hmm And your website absolutely offers so many resources for that parent to feel confident enough.
hmm hmm I mean, that's actually, thank you for saying that, Belinda. One of the things that we really pride ourselves on with that website, and this is a credit to my colleague Maria Rickert Hong, she's our resident librarian. She's the one who has built up the resources. And what she has done and what we've contributed to on that website is articles, but at the bottom of the articles, there is a little tab that says sources and references. And every single article is backed by peer-reviewed literature. So, like, let's say we're writing something about leucovorin, which is a topic in the autism community right now. Everyone's talking about leucovorin as a therapeutic that can help kids develop speech. It's a form of a B vitamin. It's been around for a long time, but it recently became popular again for people to talk about. So people have questions about leucovorin. You can come into our website, type it in, leucovorin, get the article about leucovorin, and at the bottom is all the medical literature talking about leucovorin. So that's true for anything. You want to know about mold, find the mold article, and then at the bottom is all the medical literature
Wow.
about mold and mold toxicity and health. And that to me is really important because a lot of this stuff feels like it's on the fringe or the periphery or the margins of what people are doing because conventional medicine doesn't embrace us yet. And that's okay. They will
No.
eventually. In the meantime, we as parents need to be confident, to use your very good word, that what we're doing for our kids is okay and is safe and is backed by science. And so that's what we've built into the website is like letting them know that like all these articles about the importance of omega fatty acids or, minerals and nutrients in your diet. Here's why. You know, ADHD kids often are deficient in zinc. They're often deficient in magnesium. So supplementing or putting more of that into your diet is, how you sort of can help correct those kinds of things. So that's an important part of the work we do too, is putting the evidence behind the information.
That is incredibly important. You are literally allowing parents to come to your website and not have to stay up all night looking up supporting documentation, which
That's
can
right.
take forever
Yeah.
because of logarithms.
Mm.
And so it's so great. This is incredible. I feel like documenting hope, this website is probably really good for all parents, whether your child has any issues or yourself. If anybody, it's just good to have this resource for any questions as far as detoxifying our lives and thriving, because we probably every single one of us has some sort of something that we could be reversing.
Of course. I mean, that's just the living in this world. We
Right.
all are exposed to things. And, it's
Yeah.
funny because a lot of the parents who come into our community who have a kid with autism or pandas or whatever it is, they're so confused. They're like, I don't understand. There's no autism in my family. I'm perfectly healthy. As they progress down the path and they're sort of looking at the root causes of their child's symptoms, they start doing the lab tests themselves. They start realizing, oh, my nervous system is dysregulated. Oh, my gut's in rough shape. Like, oh, I tend to have a little bit more toxicity than I thought. Like we start understanding that just because we're adults and we're not expressing like the symptoms of autism doesn't mean we're not toxic, doesn't mean we don't have some of these immune issues. What happens to adults is oftentimes it comes a little later. It might take a little longer. So then you start seeing people in their 30s and 40s and 50s getting cancers or hypertension or putting on weight or having hormone dysregulation. So that's where we see it in adults. I love the family that takes this as an invitation to have everybody in the family heal. Even if it's the child who's showing the worst symptoms, when everybody changes their diet, everybody changes the home, those are the families who do the best.
Well, what's interesting is because what's happening is we're reversing our idea, what's been normalized as sickness.
Mhm.
Because really, when we are experiencing what's been advertised to us as sickness, is really the body detoxing itself. And so, the more that we can support the body detoxing itself, and the reason why it's happening in the context of a family where they have somebody, a child who presents with PANS or PANDAS or autism, that child, we could essentially theorize that that child is taking on the energetic release that
Mhm.
everybody in the family has been needing, but has been ignoring. And
Mhm.
so now that this child is presenting with this, and you have the resources to actually do a deep dive to clean up everything, and in cleaning up the child and helping the child's body to fortify itself, everybody else's body, if they choose to step in, also fortifies itself. Because guess what? It actually began with us, and the child's just bringing it to us.
Right. I mean, I always say that, like when a child ends up getting a diagnosis, it doesn't feel like a gift or anything that we should have gratitude for, but I feel this moment of like, oh my gosh, this child took it for the team. I feel incredible gratitude toward that child because that child is bringing to our awareness something we couldn't see otherwise.
Right. And to add on to that, essentially, these kids that are coming in that are presenting with autism, could we say that they're taking one for the team, for the entire collective?
Oh, 100%. I say this all the time. I really do think that this is a cohort of souls or beings or energetic bodies or however your theology defines it that have come in to wake us up to create a more awareness and not just about the toxicity or the nutrition problems or whatever. It's really about consciousness and being more awake and more aware. And I think of these beautiful, beautiful babies who've come in to do that for us, for humanity. And I am just overwhelmed with gratitude and humility because can you even imagine like just how giving and loving that is to help serve humanity that way and just to show us the path forward. And it's not everybody's ready to wake up, but for those who do because of their child and their child's experience, it's the most profound, beautiful healing and awakening you could possibly witness.
I feel like now, every night when I do my prayers, I want to say a prayer of gratitude for the parents
Hmm.
that are doing this work.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
amazing because it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And so thank you to them for doing this work for the collective. And thank you. Thank you for your work. So your community on Documenting Hope, do you have a map that people that's like worldwide so people know where they could tap in? If there's like people in Oregon that are interested in connecting with this community, is there already a little group of people that are on Documenting Hope that are in Oregon or in California?
So it was something we actually always wanted to build. We don't have an in-person network like that yet, but we have a couple of ways that people can connect. So we have people that come into our healing community and then they just talk live and we see where people are and sometimes they connect that way. And that has happened. In fact, there is somebody who came into Healing Together as a dad, which we don't see as often. Usually it's the moms, but as a dad. And he had heard about us on Instagram or something like that. So he joined our community and we're talking about him. We're just talking and he sort of indicated that he lived in the same town that I did. And I was like, wait a minute. And as the crow flies, we're like less than a mile away. So, like you find your connections online. We also do an annual conference every November. So we're doing a conference November 21st and 22nd in Orlando. And that's a wonderful place for people to come together and meet up. And then they are able to make their own little pods. But as our community grows and as our organization grows, that's my dream is to put together like little chapters based on
Yes.
geography because I think that would be such a wonderful, wonderful thing to happen.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
Yeah,
I'm definitely going to start putting it out there. Thank
great.
you so much, Beth. Is there anything else you want to add before we end our time together?
I don't think so. The only thing I would say, if anybody's looking for help or support, you can find us on documentinghope.com and just know that we're here. That's why we exist to support parents and practitioners. We help practitioners come up the learning curve too. So we're here for everybody's support.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.